This is Pod Strangely Warmed, a place where we tell the good Methodist story, where we have conversations that invite followers of Jesus to seek after that loving, just, and free world that God imagines for us all, and have a little fun along the way. Hey, Pod Strangely Warmed family, we are back in the studio after the Uniting Annual Conference. We hope you enjoyed the Man on the Street episode and the Essentials Draft. We were told after the fact of the Essentials Draft that the way we put those teams together, that graphics weren't going to make a whole lot of sense to vote. So just comment on this video or on the other one, which one of us you think had the best team, because we do that in part for the joy of it, but also for the competition. But today we are back here in studio continuing our conversation, getting to know the teams that will help lead us as we go forward as the Horizon Texas Conference. Today on the podcast, we have operations, or at least representatives of operations. Dr. Kevin Walter, the Director of Operations for the newly forming conference, and Kofi Williams, the Administrative Assistant supporting events. Thank you both for being here today.
Well, thank you.
We spent a long time talking ahead of time about how to best describe your position, Kofi. So I hope we at least in the introduction got it semi-right. And we're going to hear a little bit more about it here in a little bit. But I'd love to begin just by getting to know you guys a little better. Kofi, we officially met for the first time today. And
Exactly.
so can you help us get started? I've asked you to bring something yourself on a shelf to help help us get to know you a little better. What'd you bring today?
I actually brought a photo of my best friend, my biggest supporter, and that was my little sister, my youngest sister named Teresa. And unfortunately, she's no longer with us. I lost her 10 years ago to cancer. However, she is my inspiration. She is my motivation. She is the reason that I do the work that I do and how I show up in the world. So she's always kind of on my shoulder, cheering me on, leading me on, inspiring me to do the work that I do.
Well, very good. I'm so thankful for her presence in your life. And even in this time of loss in the aftermath, right? That she has helped shape and form who you are. When you're not here in the office doing administrative support for events, what do you love to do?
So because I'm new, let me give you a little context.
Sure.
First of all.
Yeah.
I am an empty nester. I have 2 adult sons. I also happen to be an introvert. So I love doing those things that feed my spirit, that help me to stay calm and give me peace. So you're going to find me mostly out in nature. I love to take long walks along the Trinity River. I love to go hiking. I'm a novice golfer.
Nice.
I'm an avid pickleball player, and I understand there are some pickleball players here in the conference, so I'm looking forward to connecting with them. But mostly I enjoy being in the comfort of my home. I read a lot of books, a lot of self-help and motivational books. I enjoy watching documentaries, practicing my Spanish. My goal is to become bilingual. I will say that my understanding is much better than my pronunciation. But basically, those are the things that you'll find me doing, just things that pour into my soul, into my spirit, and that give me peace and keep me aligned.
Okay. When you're on the pickleball court, right?
Yes.
Are you the aggressive pickleball player or the person that lets the game come to them and is kind of responsive in the midst of it?
I'm more of the responsive player.
Okay.
Yeah. I enjoy the sport itself.
Very good. Very good. What is the best book you've read in the last year?
Oh, my goodness. That is a great question. It's a book called Not Nice.
Okay.
I tend to be, I have a servant's heart. And sometimes those of us who give a lot tend to give sometimes too much. And so it's about, that book is about finding that balance in between being the nice person and our own well-being.
Yeah. Not so giving of yourself that you forget
Deplete
about yourself
yourself.
in the midst of that. Very good.
Exactly.
I'm glad that I think a lot of us in serving ministries, right, could use the book called Not Nice. Who's the author?
I'm going to have to.
That's okay. That's all good. Yeah. Kevin, you have been with us surrounding the podcast. You've been at a couple recording sessions at General Conference. You helped us navigate some connections to get Charlie Baber on. Y'all were knew each other back in seminary. But what have you brought for the shelf today to help us get a window into Kevin Walters?
Yeah, so I brought a duct tape covered Bible that I made years ago when I was, maybe in college or something like that. And the reason I brought it is because it reminds me of an important time in my life of spiritual transformation, growth, and the fact that I was able to take it with me as I journeyed lots of different places, mission trips, camp, things like that. So yeah, I brought that just as a reminder of that important time of growth in my life.
Very good. The duct tape Bible. Now you can buy those in the store as like an official product today.
I'm pretty sure they stole my idea.
Right.
So
royalties sent to Dr. Kevin Walters at Horizon Texas Conference UMC.org or something like that,
yeah,
right?
which doesn't exist.
Which doesn't exist. So, details. Very good. It is amazing how something as simple as our Bible, right? And when it's in that form, one that has gone with us on the journey can keep us grounded in many of those different moments. I've still got my confirmation Bible and my ordination Bible, and they're both looking a little rough around the edges. But to think about all the different places and spaces that they have been with on the journey is a really important thing. Yeah. Kevin, when you are not here doing all things operations, as we gathered today, you said, we do operations so you don't have to.
Yes.
And on behalf of all the programmatic brains in this entity, we are thankful that you do that. But when you're not doing operations, what are you doing? Where are you hanging out? What do you love to do outside of work?
Yeah, so my wife, Sarah, and I have been married now for 21 years. We have two teenage children. Our oldest just started his first year of college in Chicago at DePaul University. Our younger is 16. She's a junior in high school, and she is a new driver.
Okay.
So that's been an exciting part of our family life recently.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I do... if you ask my kids if I have any hobbies, I'm pretty sure they'd say church. Okay. Because I'm a lay person, so I'm also a member of a local church, and I see that as being one of the primary places where I do discipleship. And so that's always been a really encouraging part of my own faith journey, as well as helping other people know the love that God has for them. So most recently, I've been working with senior high youth at my church, teaching Sunday school, which is fun. They're a great group of kids. Also this summer, I had a chance to go as an adult on the youth mission trip that our church did.
Nice.
I think the last one I had done was 2019, the last year of CTCYM for the Central Texas Conference. And I used to do children's and youth ministry full-time in a local church.
Oh, nice. Okay.
About 20 years ago, something like that. And so I've led mission trips, things like that, and I know the burden that is. So it was actually a real pleasure just to sit back, be part of the mission trip. It was all I could do is support other people. Yeah. And it was nice to know at the end of the day, if something needed to be figured out, that wasn't my responsibility. Yeah. So it was great. I could focus on getting to know the youth and the kids, teaching them things. It was really freeing, that they... Yeah. You could just have this time to spend with young people without having to worry about what are we doing for dinner tonight, or this van broke down. What do we do? So it was a really good experience doing that again.
Every detail wasn't yours.
It wasn't
to
mine.
Own, right? Which is interesting because you're kind of a detail guy, right? But in that space, it was freeing to just be able to show up and be. What was different now than 20 years ago? I mean, the vernacular has changed, right, with our senior high school students. But were there any kind of marked differences in that mission trip experience, or were there just a lot of kind of shared commonalities other than not having to be in charge?
Times have certainly changed. One of the things I appreciate on our mission trip, the way we did things, is the youth had to check in their cell phones at the beginning. So they didn't have their cell phones, which takes me back to 20 years ago before kids really had cell phones. That wasn't really a concern of ours. And then we as adults, we could have our cell phones for emergency purposes, but we couldn't be absent-mindedly just sort of flipping through, killing time, something like that. That's just a bad look. So it was... It was freeing to just have that more of that FaceTime with young people, with the other adults for that matter too. We had a great group of leaders. So I'd say that's one of the main.
Were you able
changes.
to tell Clifton and the bishop and other conference leadership, hey, I'm on mission trip this week. My phone, I can't have it with me. It's just away. So if an operations thing comes up, it's, call Dustin.
Yeah, I guess nothing happened.
Okay. Crisis avoided, which is a wonderful thing, right? There's something freeing about that.
You put the out of office message on and just
Call it
set
good.
some boundaries.
Yep. Kofi, you mentioned earlier that you're an empty nester in this season of life.
Yes.
And Kevin just described for us that as a situation that seems a little scary and intimidating to me. My oldest is 13 and in 8th grade, so haven't quite wrapped my head around the idea of having a college freshman and a new driver at the same time. And so do you have any advice for Kevin as he navigates this in the parental sphere, or those of us who are coming up even a little further behind in the process here of just making our way into this moment that can be a little intense?
That is a really great question. And it's kind of difficult to answer that because all of our kids are so unique. I had the pleasure of raising 2 young men, so I don't have a daughter to compare that to. But I would simply say, the thing that always gave me comfort is that I raised my boys in the church, and I just prayed that I had instilled in them the principles that would lead and guide them in the right way. And basically, we just have to, at least I allowed them to fly, and just taking heart with that I had done the best that I had, that I could, by laying that spiritual foundation for them.
Amen. Setting some bumpers in the bowling lane, right?
Exactly.
Very good.
Because we can't be with them 24 hours a day. We can only do what we can do and then leave the rest up to God.
Amen. Kevin, we shall try, shall we?
Sure.
Amen. All right. Kofi, can you give us a little background? We've talked about kind of your personal history a bit. Professionally, what makes you the absolute right person to coordinate all the details and support our kind of more programmatic-minded folks when they've got events coming along?
That's a great question. And actually, Kevin and the interview team asked me that very same question.
Okay.
So I've been doing this work for about 30 years now. I've worked in the public and private sector as well as higher education and just managing the offices of C-suite executives. I've been with several higher ed educations facilities, just managing those offices. And the thing that really attracted me to this particular position is I wanted to join an organization that mirrored my values and that allowed me to use my creative talents and spirits, to be able to coordinate, to be able to communicate, and to be able to lead. But what was most important to me is when I saw the job description, to be totally honest with you, I didn't know a lot about the United Methodist Church. And in doing my research, when I looked at the mission of the church to go out and make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world, I thought, well, that's in line with my values.
Yeah.
And then I started reading the unification plan, and I came across the 5 strategic focuses. And I'm also a life coach and motivational speaker.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And when I looked at those 5 strategic areas, 4 of them really aligned with the work that I've been doing all of my life, attracting followers of Christ and reaching out to diversity and helping people to heal and care and empowering people to tell their stories.
Yeah.
So when I read all of that and then meeting Kevin and the members of the interview committee, Reverend Owen, Reverend Joy, Reverend Jenna, I knew that it was aligned with my values, my personal values, my professional values, and my spiritual values. So I like to say that I was actually guided here to the conference.
Well, we're thankful. We just went through the Unifying Annual Conference, and you helped coordinate a lot of details for that. And I know that we were all very thankful and excited for the clergy retreat, right? The first email I ever got from you was to say, here's your hotel. You don't have to worry a thing about it. Everything is done. and that is an incredible gift. As somebody who ends up coordinating for our own church often, the annual conference hotels and juggling all of that and finding where's the best combination of value and proximity and everything. So thank you for that and for the spirit with which you're bringing to this.
Thank you.
Kevin, in that interview process with Kofi, it sounds like y'all hit a home run here. Was there something in her spirit that just jumped out to you and said, we have to have this person on our team?
Sure. Well, beyond her stellar qualifications.
Absolutely.
Beyond that, what we really appreciated about her was sort of the calming presence we thought that she would bring to the room. She's got this way of conducting herself in the world that just sort of calms things down and makes things seem okay. So we really felt that would be a great addition to our team. So we're glad she said yes.
Amen. Amen. Peace matters.
Yes.
And it really can help us through really hard things. Kevin, for some of us with Central Texas Conference legacy history, you're a familiar face, right? You're somebody we've known and we've seen your work for a long time in the operations sphere. But for those who don't know, you tell us a little bit about your kind of professional history that makes you the right person to be overseeing all of the operations for the Horizon Texas Conference.
Sure. So, as I mentioned previously, I worked in a local church doing children's and youth ministries for about 4 years. And then I decided, let's go to graduate school. So I did that. So I'm a layperson, but I did go to Duke Divinity School, got a Master of Theological Studies there, continued on, and I did a PhD in American history. So I came at it sort of sideways. I think it's interesting. I ended up with a PhD in history, but I've only really had 3 semesters of classes in a history department, and those were all at the doctoral level. So I had a lot of makeup work to do.
Right.
But following that, there was this opportunity that opened up in Central Texas to do lay leadership development. And so I looked at that. I interviewed with Dr. Georgia Adamson, a previous assistant to the bishop of the Central Texas Conference, and she brought me in as part of the team in 2014. So I spent the first few years doing more programmatic stuff, doing lay leadership development, working with lay servant ministries, helping churches really know how to invest and develop the leaders among them. And then after doing that for several years, I was invited in to do more of an operations role. They changed my title to Director of Operations and Project Management about 6 years ago, something like that. And I took on new things like closed church properties, organizing things like annual conference and just all the details because I guess I have a natural affinity for solving and keeping track of details. So when we were unifying the conference, they invited me to come into this role of operations in the Horizon Texas Conference, and I'm happy to do so. So we have a lot of churches and people to get to know. I'm not from Texas. I'm originally from Minnesota. But I got here, as I said, about 10 years ago. And I worked really hard to get to know all of our Central Texas Conference churches and also clergy. We keep moving the clergy around. So I've lost a little bit of track where everyone's landed in those last 10 years. But
tell me about it. Yeah.
And so now I have a whole bunch of new people and new churches to get to know. So I'm looking forward to doing that going forward.
Very good. You've got churches and clergy to get to know. We also have the rest of your team to get to know here because y'all are doing a lot of work in operations, but you're not the whole team supporting the operations work of the annual conference. Who else is on the team? And give us a brief overview of kind of what their individual roles are.
Yeah, so in addition to Kofi, we have 2 other administrative assistants. We have Glennis Eccles, and she is an administrative assistant focusing on data and statistics. We also have Audrey Thompson. She focuses more on general things, scheduling meetings, things like that, handling phone calls, making sure those get to the right people. And we're sort of living into this as well as we're unifying, 3 different offices and, who's doing what. So we're sort of dispersed widely right now, covering our bases with that. Also under operations, we have our IT team. So we have Lisa Putnam as our IT manager. She's from the North Texas Conference historically. So she runs databases, does some high-level planning for things like that. So she's a valuable part of our team. We also have Calvin Scott, who is our IT analyst, sort of this real specialist of knowing what's really going on behind the screen of these computers and what is in the server room and details like that. So Calvin's a valuable member of our team. He also wears another hat, and that is as the conference archivist of the Horizon Texas Conference. Okay. So he has a unique skill set that allows him to both do the IT work, but also be thinking historically of what of these records will really matter going forward, and what do we need to keep and preserve from our shared history together as annual conferences. And then finally, we have Tom Christian. He is a property manager from the North Texas Conference. He's been doing this work for a long time, and I was very excited that we could have him continue in that role. So he does a lot of the legwork in sort of the legacy area of the North Texas Conference, working with properties from closed churches or supporting DSs in their work with that as well. So we put together a great team. So I'm really looking forward to the work we can do together.
That does sound like a really amazing team with great individual specialists in specific areas that'll support the work of the annual conference.
Yes.
Kofi, you mentioned, sorry.
I just wanted to piggyback off what Kevin said about our operations team. You know, you were so gracious to give me accolades for my part in the Unifying Conference, but it was greatly a team effort. My coworkers, my peers, Glynis and Audrey, and all of the DAs all contributed. You know, I'm a huge proponent of the administrative staff and the work and the contributions that we add to the success of the work that we do here at the conference. So just everyone's been so supportive. There's such a spirit of teamwork here. And so I really just wanted to give them a shout out. You know, I happen to be sitting here, but I am just one of a vast group of very talented, hardworking, committed administrative staff.
Amen.
And I don't want to step on any toes here, but other than Christ, I like to say, you know, we're like the tires on a car. And without those tires, you don't go very far. So I just wanted to give them that shout out.
No, any pastor or leader who is worth their salt knows the deep abiding value of our admins in our midst, and also knows just what a gift to have really amazing people doing that work is. So thank you for making sure we shouted everybody out here on the podcast. You mentioned in your kind of coming to this work, the 5 strategic priorities and the role that they had in kind of you feeling some, synchronicity with the alignment. There we go. That's a better word. With kind of your spirit and your heart and the way you do your work with the work that the annual conference is trying to do.
Yes.
The other teams that we've had on are specific teams for each one of those areas. Operations, you support and undergird each and every one of them in their own way, right? The championing children and youth, the maximizing care and healing, pursue and embrace diversity, multiply Jesus followers, and
telling our stories.
Telling our story. Why is it that as we sit here at this table trying to tell our story, the one I'm forgetting is tell our story? Dustin, help me with that. Why is that? It's the one we're tasked with doing, but and it's the team I'm essentially on. But that's okay. Tell me about where your work. I know we're in early days. You mentioned we're kind of in this formation period, right? We're making the bridge as we walk across it in many ways. But where have you already seen the work of your team coming to support one of those 5 areas in this time?
I would describe it in terms of we get to live vicariously through the work of our colleagues in the other areas. You know, we provide the resources and the tools that they need to do what they feel that they're being called to do with their team and their alignment with the strategic priorities. Anything from making sure that they have PCs that function and do well, that they have access to the information they need, database type information. All the things that go on behind the scenes, all the way down to making sure that they have an adequate office space for when they need to be in an office space at some point. So I would say that's sort of our primary function. So as we're sort of launching more of these programs, for example, the clergy grief retreats and things like that, like we helped build a registration form for that. We help take care of some of those details so that our colleagues can focus on sort of the FaceTime and the program aspect of it.
So forgive me if this doesn't come across the right way, but I'm a sports guy, right? Okay. And it's football season, and so football is kind of high on the brain at the moment. It sounds a lot like the operations team is kind of like the offensive line, right? The offensive line, when you think about the work of the offensive line, they are the ones who make the way for the running back to do their thing or for the quarterback to throw the pass and they go largely unnoticed as long as things are going well, right? But they are incredibly essential for everybody else to do the work. And I say this as a guy who never got to play quarterback or running back or anything like that. I was always going to live on the offensive line. And so maybe like that living vicariously, you're creating the space for others to thrive and to look good while doing it, right? Joy could have the best grief retreat ever, but if we can't register for it in an effective and functional way, right?
Exactly.
It becomes really hard for that ministry to thrive in the way that it might otherwise. So,
and also then capturing the data from it so that the continued contact is possible, and so that it's not just a one-off event, but it's sort of the start of a connection that can be use going forward as well.
Absolutely.
And if I could, speaking of connection, when I think of our operations team, I see us as kind of the thread that connects the various ministries together. For instance, in my role, I can be the liaison for getting a registration form set up, but then also working with Pam Hughes in communication to make sure that all of the parties involved are communicating with each other so we know who's on first and what's expected. So we tend to, at least in my perspective, we tend to be that thread that connects as we're learning and growing and unifying. And I see our role in that respect.
That's beautiful.
Yes.
Absolutely. The thread that keeps us connected. One of the big tasks that you all have had, and Kofi, you bore witness to it just a moment ago, it has been the Unifying Annual Conference, right? It occurred as we record last Saturday. It was the first time that we got to have clergy and lay leadership from across the newly forming Horizon Texas Conference all in one place. And I know that for me, worship was one of the things that just stood out. And there's nothing better than 1,500 people in a room singing and like the way it echoes off the wall, even in a room where they've tried to control the sound, right? And that's the difference between the sanctuary and the conference center, right? The conference center, everything is kind of buttoned up, and in the sanctuary, it's meant to reverberate. But there's something powerful about that for me as a preacher coming in that space, that unity of voice, that unity of perspective. Was there a moment in the midst of the Unifying Annual Conference that kind of brought you joy, brought you laughter, kind of said, oh, we're here, even though we're still making the bridge as we walk across it? A memorable moment for you?
Yeah, for me, I would say it was, I was sitting up on stage most of the time. I was elected as conference secretary, so I'm, keeping track of things, watching the details.
Absolutely.
But when
we are thankful, Kevin.
But when we got into worship, that was powerful, standing up in front of 1,000 people that we had in person, singing at you when you're up in the front, and we were singing right back. We didn't have nearly as many people, but it was fun. And as a former choir member from my university choir, I love singing. Yeah. And it's even better singing with other people. And so that was just a powerful moment of hearing those mixed voices from the 3 legacy conferences coming together to worship as one at that time.
Absolutely. Yes. That was powerful. Kofi, was there anything that jumped out to you?
It really was. I spent the majority of my time out front in registration. But what was really impactful for me is when we had the opportunity to go on stage and to be introduced by Bishop Sines.
Yeah.
And as I stood on the stage and looked out over that vast audience of 1,000 clergy and laity together, it really cemented to me the power of the work that we're doing collectively as a conference. Yeah. And at that specific moment, I felt connected to the conference, and it was a very proud moment for me to be officially a member of the new Horizon Texas Conference.
That is amazing.
It's something that I will always remember.
Amen. Amen. And for me, in addition to the singing, that Kofi, what you just said reminded, when we look around the room, and to think about all of the communities, all of the neighborhoods, all of the small towns and big cities represented in that space.
It's beautiful.
There's a lot of places we may never actually go see. We may not actually ever be tangibly in ministry, but through the connection we are in ministry in places we may never visit. We may not spend more than, I feel connected to Abilene in a way that I'd never felt connected to Abilene before. Exactly. But I know through the churches there and through the university there, good stuff is happening in that space, and God is doing good there. Yes. Kevin, I've been meaning to ask you, this is kind of a hard pivot, but that's okay. Forever in the Central Texas Conference, our legacy conference, Dr. Clifton Howard was the conference secretary. And one of the iconic visions of annual conference was Clifton sitting up on the stage with about 17 layers on, because every conference space was frigid. Did you inherit a hoodie or a sweatshirt or anything? Was there not a passing of a baton, but a passing of kind of cold weather gear from Clifton to you in this embracing of this new role?
Well, Clifton is a special case. Clifton, as people who know him, will know that he's always cold. So that's just Clifton. It could be 75 degrees in there, and he would still want a fleece jacket or something like that. But I've enjoyed working with Clifton, learning from him over the years, and watching his orange juice bottle become a meme at annual conference. So I'm certainly no Clifton Howard. I don't think I will be able to stand up to the mic and convince people to keep donating money to the conference offering in quite the same way that Clifton Howard is gifted to do so. But I hope I can be the best Kevin Walters that I can be in that role. So.
Amen. And if you ever need some encouragement, we'll just invite Bishop Signs to channel pep rally Coach Bishop Signs again, and it'll pump everybody up. It'll all be good. Yeah. Kevin, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. Kofi, thank you so much for being here. And thank you to the entire operations team for all that you're doing to help undergird and support the work of the annual conference as we move toward the horizon together. And thank you for joining us today on Pod Strangely Warm. We'll be back next week with more leaders in the Horizon Texas Conference. Until then, I'm Daniel Hawkins. This has been Pod Strangely Warm. If you enjoyed our conversation today, know that you can find us anywhere you find podcasts. On Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, any and all the places, we are there. So if you want to continue the good United Methodist conversation that you've been a part of today, find us, like us, rate us, review us, and share with a friend so that the good news that is happening right here in our own midst can amplify even more. I was about to say, you just told us you were the connection point, and what that says to the rest of us is, the buck stops with Kevin. So we may want to ask Dustin to edit this part out.
I might want to take that out.
Just so that you're not bombarded at conference.